Welcome to Adoption Matters. We're a podcast with real people sharing real stories and getting real about adoption from all three perspectives of the adoption triad. I'm Sally Ankerfelt, an adoptive parent, and I have with me today Sharon Butler Obaze, who is my colleague and an adoptee. Today we are missing our primary co-host, Kim Noeth, who is a birth mom. She is not able to be with us today. So Kim, we really miss you and wish you could be a part of this conversation. Together on this podcast, we explore difficult topics and we share frank conversations that are guided by our commitment to truth-telling and truth-seeking. So welcome to our podcast today. Sharon, one of the reasons why Kim is not here today is because her mother died only about 2 weeks ago, and we offer Kim our sympathies for sure. And so she is tending to her own health, the health of her family, and just the grieving process in general. What's interesting about this is that I lost my mom on November 9th, so it's fresh. It's only about a month, uh, what, 5 weeks fresh. And that brought Sharon and I and Kim to the conversation about losing mothers, and I'm going to expand it to losing parents. And what kind of layered experience can families in the adoption constellation have when it comes to the loss of a parent? And we thought this would be a really important conversation. And, around the holidays too, loss can bubble up for people. It can bubble up for everybody, but with people through in the adoption world, it can be very layered. So Sharon, what what kind of experience do you want to share about loss within the adoption constellation from your
Yes.
view?
Well, I think the thing that I think adoptees have to experience that is different from the other members of the triad is that we lose more than one parent or more than two, because we have our adoptive parents, of course, and then there's the other layer of our birth parents. And if we're fortunate enough to know who they are, and we can also experience loss with them because even though many times by the time we find out who they are or we haven't had a chance to meet them, if you're in a closed adoption, for example, like I was, um, then you find out they've already passed and you didn't have a chance to interact with the person. So that's a sort of um, ambiguous loss, kind of like you never really got the chance to meet them or know them. So everything that exists about them from the time you conceptualize who they were to the time you find out about they were gone is nothing relatable to the real person, you know. And so for me personally, I lost my adoptive parents, some time ago, and that was difficult. I have to say I was not aware of who my biological family was at the time, so it really made me feel like an orphan. It was that whole huge loss process in and on a megaphone, for example. It was screaming at me. So, the part about being adopted, I felt like I was already once removed from whatever should be normal, quote unquote, to this other scenario. And then finally finding out, or having reinforcement really around the fact that I was alone, didn't help anything. So there was that grief on top of it. I had the opportunity to meet my father. That was the only one of my biological parents I had a chance to meet because my mother had already passed, as I mentioned. So, getting to know him, even though he was 92 years old when I first met him, had already suffered a stroke and probably was cognitively maybe half of the man he had been when he was fully efficient, um, was a blessing. It was just really wonderful to get to see and know and feel and touch. and relate to someone who they say I look like, um, you know, and in a real sense, and begin to formulate conversation and relationship with that person. Um, and he was so welcoming, he made me feel like I was really welcome. So you can imagine, having that final loss on top of the other stuff I'd already gone through was kind of difficult. Um, I like to say that even though he never had a chance to get to know me when I was born because I was a secret, and he didn't even find out about me until maybe I was 32 years old. So that was the first time that my mother introduced the idea that she had even had a child to him and given it up for adoption. Of course, back then, it's not that long ago, but people weren't doing DNA tests then. And so he didn't have a chance to figure out who I was. But I got the chance to spend his last 3 years of his life with him, um, and watched his decline and everything, and went through the whole transitioning thing, and saw who he was initially compared to who he became at the end. And um, I ended up really spending a lot of time with him. I moved into the house where he was, even though I have a husband and family and all that. I just left everybody. Okay, I got to go see this. It was extremely important to me. And I slept on a mattress in the room where he was on the floor. And I just really had a chance to witness, that transition. I didn't have a chance to witness it with any of my other parents, but also I had a chance to have an emotional, spiritual connection with him. And it was extremely important to my life purpose being to have that. So he didn't get to see me come into the world, but I got to see him leave. And that was really just a big blessing for uh, my identity and who I am. And so that was my loss, my significant loss.
Yeah. Wow. As years go by, because how many years ago was that when your dad died?
He died in 2020.
Oh, not that long ago. So like
Mm-hmm.
as these years have gone by, what kind of new understandings have you had, would you say?
Um, I think, one of the things, well, getting to know who my parents were, that was a freedom anyway. So just having that weight lifted off my shoulders was amazing. Um, but, I really hadn't thought about that before, Sally. And I think it's like a painting, and you just have a diagram of a draft of what you're going to put on the picture, and you know what it is, but you haven't filled it in yet. It sort of gave me a perception of being able to fill in the portrait and finally paint a portrait of life, kind of like in full completion for an individual, an adoptee in my case. But, it just, it kind of gave purpose to who I am and what I want to accomplish. And it was really significant because I think primarily because it helped me to understand how critical those relationships are. And when I talk with clients, sometimes adoptees who have had not had a relationship or had a relationship and is somewhat estranged from each other and everything, I feel like what a loss. It's unfortunate when that has to happen. So yeah, being able to color everything in and make it vibrant and brilliant and beautiful was just really a fulfillment in my life.
Yeah, because I even think of myself with my birth mom who raised me, and just the continuity in being there in her death, in her moments of dying. There was it was part of the whole picture, like you said. And I had the other picture because she raised me. And so for you to have that 3 years, it makes sense that you would say it kind of colors in things that were blank.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to be there in his dying is also a part of the filling in the blanks, maybe, huh?
Mm-hmm. It underscores our own mortality too. I mean, something about life. You always think, "Oh, I'll be here forever," or "They'll be here forever." I'll always be able to talk to them, and it's just not true. But you
Mhm.
don't. It really comes to rest when you see this. This whole transition. I mean, I already had it with my adopted mother when she passed. It was horrible. Took me years to overcome the grief I was experiencing, but you know, that final piece, it just
Yeah.
really helps. It's helpful, really.
Yeah. And it underscores for me too, sort of as an adopted parent, not sort of, it underscores for me the the weight and the importance, if it's possible, to have connection with the birth families of our children, and that it's never too late to make that
Right,
connection either,
right.
and it or to renew the connection. And I would add too that even if the relationship is complicated, or even if the family of our children have struggles or something like that, the love and the commitment and the desire, uh, I think, to stay connected to the family who birthed them is so important, and it doesn't diminish the love. I'm thinking of one of my kids who had some tenuous relationships with their birth family, and it was kind of they were struggling relationships, but their birth mom died, and um, it was really, we could see how important it was for them to be present at that
Mm,
funeral. But then there was also a question, and I'm kind of pivoting, but it was kind of like, well, how can we support them, this child, our child, in this loss? Because
mhm,
we're we're kind of outside of the experience, you know? And we were, my husband and I were wondering, well, do we go to the funeral
mm,
or do we not go? Or we decided that, of course, we asked our child, do you want us at the funeral? And that was a yes. And um, we also wondered about our child's grandmother, the mother of our child's mom. And the grandmother actually, we called and offered our sympathies because we had her number, the grandmother's number. And um, the grandmother invited us too. So we were doubly
mm.
invited.
That's nice.
And so we went. And when we got there, it was really amazing, first of all, how our child's birth family was so, they said, oh, we are so glad to meet you, because in their experience, their birth family member, our daughter, was whisked away and never
Mm,
to be seen again. They didn't
mm,
they didn't have any information about, they didn't know about us. They wondered if she was safe, if we were treating our child well,
mhm,
all of
mhm.
those things.
Yeah, yeah,
And
sure.
and so that was the first thing is, oh, it's great to meet you, and we see that you look like you're nice people, and that our beloved family member
Yeah.
was okay with you. But then the next thing was, where do we sit,
Okay.
right?
Yes.
I mean, it was different. We decided we would kind of sit not with the family because we weren't invited
Right.
to sit with the family. We sat
Mm,
kind of in the towards the back a little
yes.
bit. And so then we watched our child with the family, and the outpouring of grief that our child gave to, during the passing by of the casket and things.
Mm, mm,
Um it we just were careful, I'd say,
right.
careful to not insert ourselves. but
Mm,
also wanting to be there. And then at the end, we said, is there going to be a little reception or something? There wasn't.
mm.
So we invited our child to go out to eat with us, and then several other people of the family wound up coming too. So it was kind of
Oh,
like a
cool.
mini reception.
Uh-huh.
And then we were invited. I should back up. We were invited to the cemetery,
Oh,
so
good.
we went to the cemetery too. But it's all to say that
Mm,
as adoptive parents, let's not be afraid of being there for our kids when a birth parent dies, and ask, how can I best support you? If our kids are under our child was an adult at the time when their
mm,
birth mom died, but if our children are small, find the person in the birth family with whom you can ask, offer sympathies and ask about how best can we support this, and you know just being open about it. Hey, we want to be there, but we also don't want to insert where you don't want us to be. But um, the more we are open about that, the better we can support them in that.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because really, it's about belonging, isn't it, too?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like our kids belonging, and they have this, like you said, a whole other family of which we are, as adoptive parents, kind of what's the word? Anyway, loosely connected to through our child,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't mean they're loosely connected, whether
Right,
they've seen them often or not.
right.
Um, they're very much emotionally connected, and to
Mm-hmm.
be there for our kids.
Right, right. No, it's funny how much clarity I think as an adoptee you're given when you have a chance to interact with your birth family about things that you maybe not had not thought of in the process of being with your adopted parent. And that's not to diminish anything about adopted parents. I mean, they were my heart, my soul, my they were my providers. They did everything they possibly knew how to do. Some things correctly, some things not so much. But
Right.
anyway, it didn't make me less of a person or anything to have gone through the experience as an adoptee. I just became more aware of who I was and how I am and everything once I knew my birth family. So it's expanded sort of like my horizon in terms of what I could do and how I could approach the world, and clarification around why I thought about things in a certain way. So, but it
Yeah.
was meaningful.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, for me too, like, I think the more we supported our child through the death of their birth mother, the more I would like to ask them this, but my experience was that they felt closer to us too,
Mm-hmm.
because we were just really there for them and not worried about, will they
Oh
love us
man.
less?
Yeah.
Will our child love us less, or anything like that? It was more
Mm-hmm.
like they really saw we were there for them, even in this really super, super difficult time.
Yep. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That is so wonderful, Sally. I can't even tell you. I think about, I wonder what my parents would have been like had they known my birth parents, because that didn't happen. Of course, like I said, they didn't have that information available for people to, do research with at that time in California. This closed birth certificates, no one can see your birth certificate, so them saying that they didn't have the information was true. I mean, because no one had any kind of regulation or um, support system to, make this manageable for the adoptee. They were just concerned with managing the process and not thinking about the person.
Yeah, yeah. There are lots of layers to it.
It's so, so
I mean,
many.
I've heard, one other really power, and we won't be getting into it because it's not our experience, but a powerful podcast from somebody who had talked about being called into the situation because they were an adoptee, and the birth parent died, and there was nobody else, and so they were
Mm,
summoned to make big decisions. about somebody who they didn't really have a sustaining relationship with, yet clearly loved. But so there's a lot that can happen with adoptees and adoptive families and birth families. And I know Kim would have had a very important perspective, and someday we can maybe ask her about that too, for herself. But Kim is, as I should remind people, Kim is our primary co-host, who is a birth mom who's not here today. So, yeah.
Yeah. And who
Wow.
did experience loss.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
Well, thanks, Sharon. Do you
Thank
have anything
you.
else, like anything burning before we conclude?
I think with the holidays being here, like you said in the beginning, it's sort of like when all families come together, pretty much, and having that period without the relationship with the parent you've lost is really difficult. It's a reminder. So just have grace and with people that you know in the community or otherwise that have gone through an experience of a loss that they're still grieving about and is still front of mind because it's this holiday season sometimes is a huge reminder of what they're missing.
Yeah, and even if for adoptive parents, even if our kids don't have a huge long-standing relationship, that grief can come up at Christmas or Hanukkah and other holiday
Right.
expressions pretty easily and quickly. Yeah. And I love what you said, having and grace for ourselves too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for listening to Adoption Matters, the podcast we just did with real people sharing real stories, getting real about adoption from three perspectives of the triad. Please help others find this podcast by leaving a rating on your preferred podcast platform. If you would like more information about Growing Intentional Families Together, which is our company that hosts this podcast, and how our adoption coaches can help you and your family, feel free to reach us at giftfamilyservices.com. But Sharon and I have thoroughly enjoyed being with you today, and we invite you to join us again next time for another episode of Adoption Matters. And happy holidays to all of you.